The transcendental vibration established by the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is the sublime method for reviving our transcendental consciousness. As living spiritual souls, we are all originally Krishna conscious entities, but due to our association with matter from time immemorial, our consciousness is now adulterated by the material atmosphere. The material atmosphere in which we are now living is called Maya or illusion. Maya means that which is not. And what is the illusion? The illusion is that we are all trying to be lords of the material nature, while actually we are under the grip of our stringent laws. When a servant artificially tries to imitate the all-powerful master, it is called illusion. We are trying to exploit the resources of material nature, but actually we are becoming more and more entangled in our complexities. Therefore, although we are engaged in a hard struggle to conquer nature, we are ever more dependent on her. The illusory struggle against material nature can be stopped at once by revival of our eternal Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
It's all happening, it's all happening, it's all happening, it's all happening.
All right, welcome to the podcast, episode 87 of It's All Happening with Zach Leary. That's me, your host. I'm so happy that you're here. That, of course, was A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhuphad giving a little talk about the vibrational essence and the vibrational importance of the Hare Krishna mantra and why it is so effective and why, if you chant it with great sincerity, it can free you from the illusionary nature of the material world, or what is sometimes referred to as Maya. So this week, it was really the only way to start off the podcast. Honestly, there's just no other way to do it. This week, we have a wonderful friend of mine. His name is Shyamasundar Das, and he's also the author of a new book called Chasing Rhinos with the Swami. Now, Shyamasundar Das is in his 70s, but he had an incredible life, an incredible fortune of he was Srila Prabhupada's private secretary for 7 years. So, so that means he was with him, traveling the world for 7 years as his private secretary, and really through the whole birth of the Hare Krishna, of the ISKCON movement. It started, he joined him in 1967, very, very early on in San Francisco when Srila Prabhupada first came to San Francisco. So, this book, it's really, really amazing. If you go to chasingrhinos.com is where you can order the book. Again, chasingrhinos.com. And many people who listen to this podcast, are not Hare Krishna devotees. I know that. But I really just encourage you to listen to this podcast with an open mind. And if you get curious, get the book too, because the story of Srila Prabhupada, even if you're not associating with Bhakti Yoga in this form, that's fine. But the story of Srila Prabhupada will really blow your mind. He came to America at age 69 in 1965 on a boat, on a steamship from India called the Jaladuta, and came penniless, literally penniless, and suffered a heart attack on the steamship coming over, and just started walking the streets of New York City, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, sitting under a tree. Now, you think of that now and you think, God, that just sounds like a crazy person, right? But, somehow, the times were right, obviously, in the 60s, but this movement took hold. And there he was in Tompkins Square Park and, down in the village, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. And slowly but surely, the Hare Krishna movement was born. But, he did not come with mass resources or wealth or anything like that. And, there's obviously a lot of misconceptions about the Hare Krishna movement. But the story of Srila Prabhupada is really, really extraordinary. It's really one of the great 20th century lives. And what he did in 10 years, he died, 1977 at age 81. What he did in 11 years is just extraordinary. So Shyamasundar Das, go to chasingrhinos.com to check out the podcast and to get a little bit of an inside look on exactly what it was like to be with him in these early days and to be at the very epicenter of a whole spiritual revolution just kind of taking shape around them in the middle of the 1960s. Shyamasundar Das, enjoy the podcast. Shyamasundar Das, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Zachary. I must say right away, first thing is that, 50 years later, hanging around with your father 50 years ago, I never thought in my wildest dreams that 50 years later I'd be sitting here with his son talking about Krishna.
Talking about Krishna. Oh, my goodness.
Your father and I wanted to change the world. That was it.
Well,
and maybe even save it.
Well, you both did in little ways.
It's all perfectly logical, isn't it, that we're here today?
It's Krishna's plan all along. Oh gosh. Well, two things happened. One, you have this new book out, Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, which is about your relationship and time with Srila Prabhuphad. But also there's a new movie coming out. They renamed it, it's now called Hare Krishna in the movie. It was called the Acharya, but I think for Western audiences, they needed to change it.
Right.
But I watched it. I got to see it early, and you're in it lots. And so where I wanted to start really is, let's start with you. Before we get into philosophy and Srila Prabhupada, let's start with you. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the state of Oregon. Okay. I was born in 1942, which was during the Second World War. Mm. And I think to understand the impact that the Swami had on my generation...
Yeah, you have to understand that.
You have to kind of understand the historical perspective. Our parents had gone through the Great Depression, the Second World War.
Yeah.
And then when the war machine was turned off, it started they started manufacturing all these devices to make life easy. And it became quickly the most prosperous generation of all times. Our parents' generation.
Yeah.
We had everything. They sent us all to college.
Right.
We had, suddenly for the first time in history, you had a generation, millions of people, young people who were highly educated.
And everybody could go to college, right?
Everybody went to college.
Right.
And you had the first time in history, you had global communications.
Right.
You had the jet age starting. And people could travel widely over the globe, which had never happened before.
Yeah,
I mean, we could sit in Oregon and listen to records on the radio that people in New York were hearing, and we both had the same favorites. And there was a hit parade that joined us with people across the country for the first time in history.
Right.
So we had all this stuff. And yet, our parents were kind of conformists. There was a period, the 50s, were a gray period of high conformity in society. But the young people, there was kind of a rebellious mood growing.
Rock and roll was just starting.
Rock and roll just started. The first song I heard, I remember, was Shake, Rattle, and Roll.
Okay.
And then when I heard people in New York liked it, too, things started happening in a larger way.
And then the beatniks kind of started to come a little bit. Yeah.
There was kind of a rebellious mood growing. I started reading Howl by Allen Ginsberg.
Sure.
I snuck that book into my bedroom and read it. My mother threw it away.
I've seen the greatest minds of my generation go to waste. Yes, right.
The Benzedrine Angels. And Jack Kerouac on the road. I went off to a school called Reed College in Oregon, which at that time was a very radical school.
It's a liberal arts school, yeah.
Very, very liberal.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it was the advent of LSD.
Yeah.
We were reading books, like Kerouac and that. But after we took LSD in the early 60s, we experienced a higher reality, and it was real.
Right, sure.
It was just different and better than what our parents were showing us.
Yeah, and it must have been, just so different. Because kids today, the world is pretty, it's pretty liberal and pretty secular, and it's pretty, like you can grow your hair long and it's normal now. Back then, it wasn't. It was so different to everything you were taught, right?
And for a long time, you thought you were the only one doing it, you and your few friends that you had.
But then you realized, right?
Gradually, we began to realize that this was a larger thing. And there was an area in San Francisco called the Haight Ashbury that became like a magnet for us. Everyone wanted to travel down there.
So did you?
I did. Okay. Well, I went to school in Switzerland at a small college there in 1962. And one of your father's, students at Harvard was kicked out, and he came to that same school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he taught us about this drug.
Oh, wow. Who was that? You remember his name?
I do.
What?
Michael Hatwick.
Oh, wow.
Did you know him?
No, I know the name. No, I didn't know him, but I know the name.
He was my roommate was a guy named Rock Scully.
Of course, the Grateful Dead.
Who became later manager of the Grateful Dead. So
Infamously.
The three of us used to travel to Basel and buy Sandoz acid over the counter, and that started that. So anyway, Rock went back to San Francisco, and so I joined him there later, and we began to live there from 1963 onwards.
So up until that time, so you started doing LSD when? 63?
62.
Oh, wow, early.
Early on.
Okay, so that's early. That's early in the curve.
Yeah. So we were, we were the only ones.
It was still legal.
It was still legal.
It was still legal then, yeah. It was illegal in 65.
So naturally, I changed my major from physics to philosophy.
Right, so what was your... at that time, and you're doing LSD, well, that's early. But what was your concept? What were you thinking about spirituality, or did you have any? Did you think of that at all?
Yeah, but then I started studying philosophy, and Carl Jung and these people who were delving in. I got a hold of every book I could on the Mystic East. Hesse was a big influence. Even your father's book, when it came out in 1964, The Psychedelic Experience, we read that like a Bible. But still, there was no information, very little. We had an intuitive feeling that we were on the right path. We were different. We were special, chosen in some ways, we thought. It was a crusading time. And it was still confusing, though. Everybody was saying this and that. But so we became very open to having a master or a guru to teach us, lead us out of this confusion.
Because you started to see what was going on, the social changes happening, and
the summer
the
of
civil rights revolution.
The summer of '64 in San Francisco, we suddenly looked around and knew that there were many more of us. The first rock dances were happening. The happenings, they were called.
They were called the happenings. Then,
yeah.
So up until all that's going on, and you were studying philosophy, did you have any? Sort of entry into sort of Eastern philosophy or mysticism, religion, or did that happen when...
I was studying all the various paths, but my best friend, he was a roommate there at Reed College. His name was Michael Grant. Mm-hmm. He was also a very accomplished jazz musician, and he went off to New York in the summer of 1965 and was playing there, I think, with Roland Kirk's band. Mm. And he came back that summer to Oregon. And I looked at him, what's changed with you, Michael? He says, I've become the disciple of a Swami in New York. His name is Bhaktivedanta Swami. And of course, he was the most skeptical person I knew. He was always my hero, always my hero. So I thought, wow, if he's changed so much, he's always happy. He's not taking the drugs I'm offering him. What's going on? I mean, I was so impressed with my friend, the change in my friend, that I automatically accepted his master as mine.
Wow.
Without meeting him.
And that was 65.
65.
So, I mean, Prabhupada just got here.
By 66, I think it was, yeah.
So, okay, so that happened, and tell me about meeting Srila Prabhupada.
So then...
The first time you met him.
Yeah, he was now called Mukunda Das. Michael Grant was now called...
Oh, he's Mukunda Das, yes.
Yeah.
He's in the movie lots, too.
Yeah, of course
and
he is.
He's still around. He's still alive.
Yeah, sure. I just saw him in Australia this summer.
Oh, beautiful, yeah.
And I had some close friends who later became disciples, too. Mm-hmm. But we all began to kind of pick up on what Mukunda was telling us. Mm-hmm. And so I was on my way down to San Francisco that summer anyway, and Mukunda came with me, and we decided to get a premises and bring the Swami out. So we got that place on Frederick Street in December of 66, and the Swami came on January 17th, 67, 3 days after the first human being in Golden Gate Park. The timing was perfect.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And to San Francisco.
To San Francisco.
Okay. So you guys brought him there.
We brought him there.
Okay.
Yeah, and we didn't have any money, so we decided to raise money by putting on a dance at the Avalon Ballroom. Chet Helms gave us the venue for the night free.
Okay. Great.
And Allen Ginsberg decided to... He was there for the BN, so he said... he knew the Swami.
Yeah.
In fact, due to Allen's influence, the Swami was able to get a good foothold in New York City.
Yeah.
But to make a long story short, we got a hold of my friends, the Grateful Dead, Rock, my roommate, and Janis Joplin and the Big Brother, and other groups, Moby Grape. They did their first big concert ever at the Krishna Consciousness Comes West concert, the Avalon, on the 29th of January. That was Prabhupada's, the Swami. He wasn't called Prabhupada yet. He was the Swami.
That's just what you call him. Okay.
The Swami.
The Swami.
Yeah.
Okay. So what would you call him, Swamiji, or what was
we learned that Swamiji was okay too.
Okay.
Because it's kind of the intimate form of Swami.
Yeah. But that's how you would address him.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I think what attracted me more than anything, the Swami didn't have any books or anything with him, not much. He had a few copies of the Srimad Bhagavatam with him, but it was his personal beauty that attracted us at first. His physical beauty, you could say.
Yeah.
He was just so glowing with youthful energy as an old man. We never saw him.
He was 70 years old already.
70 years old. Yeah. We never saw him like that.
Wow.
And then when he started speaking, the truth, the beauty of his words, it was so scientific and logical and based on such authority, vast authority, we automatically, by that attraction, became his disciples.
Oh. So, yeah, so so this is something it's very important for me to ask you because, you were there so early. So, we have... it's like this, and I asked Ram Dass and Krishna Das about this with Neem Karoli Baba, from my satsang, but, now all this time has gone by and these guys are so, deified and, they have Mortis everywhere and pictures everywhere. And like the humanity just feels like, I can't imagine what Srila Prabhupada was like as a person. So what was it just like in the early days just being with him? Like, what'd you do? Like, how did you talk to him? What'd you guys do all day? How did he teach you? I mean, what'd you guys talk about?
Well, he asked, after the dance, he asked Mukunda, well, who has put on this dance? And I had been initiated a few days before.
Okay.
So Mukunda said...
So you were now Shyamasundar.
Shyamasundar,
okay.
Yeah. And Mukunda said, Shyamasundar has done this. So he said, bring him to me. So my first meeting with the Swami, I didn't know what to expect. To us, Swamis were these guys who disappeared in a puff of smoke. They could go anywhere, charm cobras or whatever.
Right,
That's
exactly.
That's what we thought a Swami was.
Yeah.
Mystic powers.
Right.
And so I was very humble, and he says, and how much money did we make last night? And I said, I'm not sure. I think a couple of $1,000. He says, he said, you don't know? I said, no. And he said, the leader of something must know the finances. He said, do you know bookkeeping? And I said, no. Well, I learned it in high school, but not very good at it. He says, you come to me each day, and I will teach you bookkeeping. The Swami was so practical.
Very pragmatic.
Everything was related to Krishna and devotional service. I didn't feel like doing bookkeeping, but I sat with him each day. And the first day I sat with him, his shoulders touched mine, and I went into a swoon. I felt so good. I felt better than I had any drug ever. I knew that he was my master.
So, describe a little bit, the initial attraction to the Swami back then, and why it was so compelling. And it was, it just was so different than anything American life in those days. There were no yoga centers on every block. Mm-hmm. I mean, most people didn't even know what Krishna was. Yeah. Right? So,
yeah. Well, the main thing was that he put everything in perspective immediately. Like, God is a person. His favorite name is Krishna. He has many names, unlimited names, but his favorite name is Krishna. That means the all-attractive. So first of all, you could understand God is a person. You are a person. You're not this body. You are a spirit soul dwelling in this body. And you have a personal, eternal relationship with God based on love. And all of his energies, all of God's energies, the material energy and the spiritual energy, are all around you. And this is how you relate to all of it. So right away, you're in perspective. And once that perspective is there, everything you see and do the rest of your life is easy. Because the answers are all so clear and simple. That's what got us.
And that was so different than to what was being taught in the West, right? At that time, I mean, God was very punishing. And
I studied every Western philosopher. Yeah. I studied a year in Berlin at the Free University studying Kant. Right. And these guys just led you to unanswered. There was no answers in there, no solutions.
No, they weren't. But what's interesting about Kant and the whole Age of Enlightenment guys, at least they sort of flipped it on its head a little bit by asking the questions of maybe adding some mystery to it rather than it being so finite.
Even their philosophies, Prabhupada, the Swami put into perspective right away. Yes, they have some valuable things to say, but
yes,
his understanding and his explanation of all these things was so clear and simple, and his actions, every action that the Swami made was perfect. I didn't see any mistake or error in his activity.
It's very deliberate and perfect.
Where do you see someone like that?
Yeah.
If you find such a person, you follow that person. Huh?
Yeah. Right. So what did you? I mean, the Swami aside, though, did you immediately start gravitating towards Krishna and what that meant to you, or was it more about him?
It was more about him in the beginning. We didn't have books.
You didn't have books yet?
No, and there were no pictures even of Krishna.
Oh, really?
We just had to learn everything. So we attached ourselves to him, and he gradually unveiled these things to us. He was very cautious and slow with us. We were still smoking cigarettes and, carrying on. We had our dogs, and we had long hair and beards, and we were still hippies, but he was pulling us out of it little by little.
So there was no, upon meeting him the first time, he didn't just give you Bhagavad Gita or anything? Not yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
But he began to explain in his morning classes. He said that here's what Krishna looks like. This is what he says. This is how he acts. And it began to appear to us like there was an encyclopedic knowledge here, vast knowledge. He told us that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of books of Veda. Veda means knowledge in Sanskrit. Mm-hmm. I mean, compared to the Bible or the Quran or something, small. It was like having an encyclopedia compared to a small booklet about who God is and what he does and what he looks like. So all of his activities were explained. Prabhupada used to say, I can give you his address. Compared to all the confusing ideas about God, this was so clear. That's what got us. Wow.
So what did he say? What was Krishna? How did he act? What did he do? How did he describe it?
Well, all of Krishna's activities are based on love of his devotees, his those who love him. He reciprocates in the way that you love him. Now, this is not difficult for us to understand because we have love affairs in our lives with our parents, our children, our lovers. So you began to fall in love. Prabhupada said, if you love Krishna, automatically you love all of his creation. Just like the watering the root of a tree will nourish every branch and flower. If you give your love to Krishna, automatically he loves you back in a reciprocal way, to the same extent. So you start falling in love with Krishna, but it's a never-ending process. Just like you have a lover in your life.
Yes.
As you go through life, the love increases. It's ever increasing. Prabhupada said it's eternal.
Yeah, but it's a never-ending process in the sense that you still have to do the work, right? You still have to. And what I really love about the way that this message is delivered is that you have to continue to please Krishna, right?
Yes, yeah. And you don't. It's not like you have to make up anything new. You just replace the things that you do anyway with Krishna as the object of your activity or your desires. Whatever you do in life, you just do it for Krishna. It's called devotional service.
Okay, seva.
Seva.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's happening, and well, tell me this, and before I ask the next question, the first time you saw a picture of Krishna, because for me, in my relationship with bhakti, I had kind of a twofold relationship with being introduced to bhakti. One was Ram Das, because I grew up with him and he was always around, and reading Be Here Now. But then I had a friend in high school who became an ISKCON devotee, dropped out of high school, and took me to the temple in Culver City. When I was just a teenager, and I wasn't ready to really get into that. I didn't have the discipline. I wasn't, I had some other stuff going on. But when I saw a picture of Krishna, that did a lot for me. I was like, it was just so transcendent. And I was like, so just the all-attractive one.
So beautiful.
So beautiful.
Yeah,
but just more than beautiful. It just was so magnetic and captivating. I was like, oh my gosh. And then this idea that, the Swami puts forth in the description of saying it is the supreme personality of Godhead. That's a very, very interesting thing, I think, for people to understand, because I know you just talked about it a little bit, but tell me about that a little bit, like the supreme personality of Godhead.
Prabhupada, I guess the Vedas describe the supreme person as Bhagavan.
Yes.
And the Bhagavan means, it's translated as full in six opulences. Full in six opulences. Those opulences are beauty. God is all beautiful. The supreme person is all beautiful. His creation, everything in his creation is beautiful. Knowledge, the supreme personality knows what's happening in every atom of his creation. All strength, he can fling universes around. No one is stronger than God. Beauty, knowledge, strength, fame, No one is more famous than God. Wealth, he owns everything. And at the same time, renunciation, he's not attached to any of it. So this definition of God with these 6 opulences in full, as a person, really made us understand and appreciate Krishna just by knowing he was full in all these things.
But the renunciation part, I mean, to the Western mind, you say it's non-attachment, but we're, especially these days, we're so brought up with, having to accumulate stuff, and now you're saying, well, don't be attached to that stuff.
Yeah, well, that was the basis of Prabhupada's teaching, is that I am not this body.
Right.
And nothing in my life belongs to me. It all belongs to God. Even my relationships with my father might have been my son at one time. Even my intimate relationships with people are just illusory. They don't really exist only except in this small moment of tiny physical time. So that your real attachment should be with God. None of this around you.
And that's what's real.
That's what's real. And when you have that consciousness, you get this bliss that you mentioned.
Yes.
You get this ecstasy. And that was the point of what the Swami told us. He said, if you do this, you get to taste real pleasure. Because we're not going to do anything unless we get pleasure from it or satisfaction. And as we began to practice this, we began to understand, wow, this is pleasure beyond anything I've had ever. How do I keep doing it?
And how do you keep doing it by what you're saying? How do you keep doing the practice? How you do just it's a lifestyle in this day-to-day life, and just how do you keep that in motion, right?
Yeah, and this was the beginning of his instruction in devotional service. Now, everyone is different. Everyone has a different relationship with God. My relationship with him is different than yours. So Prabhupada had the ability to dovetail your personality with a set of services for Krishna. He gave us all certain things we all had to do, like chant, stop eating meat, these types of things. Yeah. But he gave all of his devotees an individual way to work and do activity for Krishna.
Based on sort of what you could do best?
Based on your own abilities.
Yeah. So is this what Krishna consciousness is? How do you sort of, that's another one of these phrases. There's so many great phrases that I love. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, but Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
I need to find that.
You know bhakti, what bhakti means.
Sure.
Bhakti yoga. Yoga means link or union. And in Sanskrit, our own word, English word, yoke, comes from yoga. And in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asked Krishna, what is yoga? Who is a yogi? And Krishna explains the various levels of yoga. He explains karma yoga, working for God, jnana yoga, connection with God through knowledge, the hatha yoga, dhyana yoga, other various yogas. And after explaining those yogas to us, he says, but above all of these yogas, just love me with all of your energy, just like the first commandment, love the Lord thy God with all thy might, with all thy soul, something like that. And this person, such a person, is the highest yogi of all, the most connected to me, Krishna says. So this bhakti yoga is the topmost yoga system. And Krishna consciousness means bhakti yoga, essentially.
Okay.
It's simply to be aware of Krishna at all times, fully conscious of God. And nothing can be higher than this.
And even in what my favorite sort of subtext of the Bhagavad Gita is even in the mundane, keeping awareness, being Krishna conscious, even in the mundane.
Absolutely.
And in the smallest things, washing the dishes,
Yeah. And it's not easy. How do you do that?
Right.
And what discipline do you follow to reach that state of consciousness? Prabhupada, the Swami explained in the beginning from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is about 20 volumes. I think it's 12 cantos of knowledge. It's called Srimad Bhagavatam. Literally means the God book, the book of God. It's explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam that there are 4 cycles of history in our material world. 4 ages, if you will. They all last very long time. But he explained that we are entering, and they start with the purest, most pious age and gradually decline to the 4th age, which is called Kali Yuga, and that we have entered into the age of Kali Yuga.
Right.
And we've been in Kali Yuga something like 5,000 years. And
Ignorance and greed. And
and these other yoga processes were recommended for earlier ages. This is meditation or temple worship, things like that were easier to do in earlier ages. But in this age of increasing confusion and difficulty, it's called the Iron Age, Kali. An easier process is recommended. And our minds are like jackrabbits. They're like flickering flames. It's so difficult to control the mind.
The monkey mind.
The monkey mind.
Yeah.
So Krishna says, just chant my name and think of me this way. Remind me you're there, calling my name. And this practice takes you to Krishna, this chanting, this constant recitation of Krishna's names, because everything in the absolute world is absolute. God is present in his name, and so when you say Krishna, he's there dancing on your tongue. So it's hard to forget him that way. If you're Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Like that, if you're doing the dishes or driving your car, you remember Krishna that way. This is how the discipline that you use to connect with Krishna.
So, but this is a very good segue into another one of these questions that I thought of beforehand, in that, the Kali Yuga, this very, very confusing time, and ignorance and greed and things like that. But, more specifically, the 60s, when, here you are, 1967, you're with the Swami. It was a very turbulent time. I mean, Vietnam was happening, and JFK you had already went through that, and it was very difficult. But a year later, Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, and it was a very, very difficult time. There were riots in the streets, and all of these different things were happening. And, the hippie movement was initially, sure, it was based off of an expanded consciousness, but it was also a protest movement. So what did, at this time, already in the heart of the 60s, you're already, immersed in this beautiful tradition here. How did it, change your perception of the world outside? Well,
after having absorbed what the Swami taught us, it was easy to see all of these things in perspective. The hippie phenomenon, the Vietnam War, it was easy to understand them as Krishna's plan. One of the most amazing things to understand is that the extraordinary chain of events that led the Swami to us. When you think about it, he was born in Calcutta in 1896, before there was electricity, cars, what to speak of airplanes. Yeah. And but he was educated in the English language, and Bengalis are probably India's most brilliant thinkers and logicians. So he was brought up in a tradition of that, of logic and thinking. And wave after wave of Bengali Swamis came to America. You had Vivekananda and Yogananda.
They were all Bengalis.
All Bengalis.
Right, yes.
Even Prabhupada's own guru, BHAKTIVEDANTA Saraswati, sent several Swamis to the West in the 40s, 30s, and 40s. But no one made any lasting impressions. The times weren't right.
Just wasn't right.
Yeah. But, this Prabhupada's own guru told him to come to the West in 1920s. He instructed him, you must go to the West. In the 1920s, he told him. So the Swami prepared himself. He fulfilled his family obligations. He learned English perfectly. He spent decades mastering the Vedas, reading and translating the Vedas. And then at nearly 60 years old, he took these vows of renunciation and started preaching and translating and ultimately publishing. He published a few hundred copies of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he was able to get free passage on a steamer to New York. He had no friends here, no contacts even, and no money in his pocket.
No money.
No one traveled out of India in those days. It was impossible. The banking restrictions wouldn't allow you to take but 20 rupees, I think, was what he had.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
So fearlessly he came.
Wow.
Fearlessly. Relying totally on Krishna to remove the obstacles in his path. Yeah? But the fact that on the other side of the world we were evolving this way through protest and difficulty and fighting, emerging to wanting something more, a generation of kids wanting something more.
Something deeper, yeah.
Deeper. And then he stepped through the window and there he was. He was the only Swami from the East who sat down in Haight Ashbury and lived with us. He lived with us. And I remember walking up the streets with him thinking, boy, the Swami must think this is really weird. Because in those days, at Haight Ashbury, there were thousands of hippies on the street doing the most outrageous behavior and wearing these wild costumes. And I said, Swamiji, what do you think of all this? And he said, I am an old Calcutta man. We learned what that meant later when we went to India. The streets of India look just like Haight Ashbury.
Oh, God. That's very funny. So the I mean the story, just since we're talking about that, I mean the story is just, it's so amazing. People, and this movie coming out tells it very well, but people just don't realize. I mean, he when he came, he was almost 70 years old. And he came on the steamship, went to Boston, and then he stayed on the boat, and then it went to New York, right? Then he got off in New York, and I just have this image, of, and I've been to Tompkins Square Park many, many times and try to recreate, what corner he was in, chanting. But just seeing this guy alone sitting under a tree with his kartals chanting Hare Krishna.
Well, I think that's what struck me the most about the Swami from the beginning was his love of adventure.
Yes, yes.
He used to talk about, he said that the most intimate friend, Krishna's most intimate friend, is the one who risks the most for him.
It's amazing.
Yes, and Krishna does explain, he says, my dearmost friend is the one who goes out and teaches others about me. That means going out and risking everything. And he said, he promises in Bhagavad Gita that to those who risk, I must personally interfere to overcome the obstacles. I mean, if you risk the most, Krishna has to appear with you. You get to see Krishna that way. This is what the Swami taught us right at the beginning. He says, you people be like me. Go out, do this, and you will get to see Krishna fast.
Yes, right.
So we there were no holds barred. We went out all over the world.
Yeah, so let's talk, sorry to interrupt, before you go on there, let's talk about this. I just want to set it up. So, this is very, very early days of, now what it's called ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And, in 10 years, for people who are listening who don't understand, ISKCON is a full-fledged, bona fide movement here in America and around the world. It barely existed then. In 10 years.
2 centers.
Yeah. It exploded into this gigantic, worldwide phenomenon. So this adventure that you're talking about, this is sort of, I think, what sparked it. I mean, it's just like this. Yeah. So what happened? How did you guys organize so quickly?
Well, we did the things that we like to do anyway. but we did them in a very extreme way. Number one, to try to get the Swami's attention. You knew that if you did something really big, he'd have to have you buy him. And that was the first thought.
Okay.
And secondly, he told us that Krishna has to appear to overcome these obstacles for you personally. You get to see him do it. We thought, okay, we'll test that one.
Try it out.
We were already rather risky people, so we'd already had a kind of a history of taking great risks. And he used to explain this as, you should go and chase the rhino. This was his favorite expression. This is the title of my book, Chasing Rhinos with the Swami. He said that if you chase after the rhino, everyone knows you cannot capture a rhino. And so they will, if you don't, they will say, no one can capture the rhino anyway. And if you do, they will think it's so glorious. So this is the title of the book, because I was with him 7 years in a very intimate way, and I saw thousands of rhinos being chased.
Yes.
I'm just describing them in this book. But life for me became a nonstop adventure. And I thought, well, let me test this, take this big risk for you and see if you'll help me. So even I began to do this in a way that attracted the Swami's attention.
Yes.
We went to London and met the Beatles and made records that sold millions, taught millions of people the mantra and things like that.
Yeah.
So in 1971, Prabhupada appointed me as his personal secretary. I think more than anything, so he would have a pirate playmate.
So, all of these, before I have some specific adventure questions like Moscow and Nigeria and stuff, but like from 67 to, let's say, 71, 72, right in there, how did it, people were joining and getting initiated pretty rapidly, right? In big numbers. Yeah. So what, and this isn't like, how should I explain? Like, I guess I had a lot to do with him, him being so compelling and charismatic and, truly magnetic and transcendental. But was it the time? Because people aren't doing that today for anything. I just don't mean Krishna consciousness, for any movement. There's no movement that's exploding like wildfire today like that. So how did that happen? I mean, it was thousands and thousands of people. By the time Srila Prabhupada died in 10 years, there were tens of thousands of people in this country. How did that, what was attracting them to this? I mean, and you watched it.
Yeah.
When he was there in 1967 in San Francisco, how many initiated devotees were there when you first met him? A dozen or something? You watched it.
You can say, I suppose, that there are historical phenomena that are responsible for this. In some ways, you probably can. But I think it's more has to do with the person, the magnetic personality of Prabhupada. I mean,
it was him.
He could have done it any time in history, I think.
You do? Really?
Yeah,
you think so?
He was just so unbelievable. One of the things about the Swami also, that he was, without exception, happy. He was jolly. Where do you see this in any other person? All the time jolly.
Yeah.
And so we could understand by watching him that Krishna is a joker. God is really a wonderful playmate. And life with Krishna is a constant, wonderful surprise. And once I asked the Swami, what is laughter? And he said, laughter is the difference between what you expect and what happens. So life with Krishna means you never really know what's going to happen with him. It's always a wonderful surprise.
That's fantastic.
I can tell a couple of short stories from the book that illustrate this.
Yeah.
In London, in England, in 1969, the Swami had written a book over the previous year called Krishna, and with many illustrations, hundreds of color illustrations by his devotees. And this was the explanation of who Krishna is and what he does, his activities, description of his activities translated from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. But in those days, we didn't have any money. We were expanding so rapidly. Yeah. So he asked me to ask George Harrison to print this book. And I thought, oh my God, my relationship with George is such that he likes me because I never ask him for anything. If I ask him for something, I'm just going to be one of all the other hundreds of people with their hands out to the Beatles. Yeah. But Prabhupada called me to his room and says, you ask George to print this book. And I said, well, how much is it going to be? He says, around $20,000, $20,000. In those days,
that's a lot of money.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do it, but I was going to George's to meet him that day. And we after our meeting, we went to dinner. We had dinner at a friend's house. It was getting later and later and later, and I put off asking George this. Finally, it was kind of storming out. It was a summer night. It was very late, almost midnight. We'd finished dessert. I said, now I have to do it. And I said, George, the Swami asked me to ask you if you will print this book. And this look came over George's face like, oh no, he's just another one of these people. And I thought I'd blown it completely forever. And just then, a bolt of lightning hit the house. All the lights went out, and it was silent around the table for about 20 seconds. And then the lights flashed back on, and I looked over at George, and he was grinning from ear to ear, and he says, well, how much is it then? So this is the way you get to see Krishna.
Oh, my God.
You know?
That's crazy.
You risk like that.
Oh, my gosh.
Another good story I like to tell is the 5 days Prabhupada and I spent in Russia, in Moscow.
Yeah, so let me set this up here.
Okay.
Like, people don't understand, like, going to, what year is this?
1971.
71. Like, going to the Soviet Union in 1971, you didn't do it. Nobody did it.
Couldn't do it.
You couldn't do it. You couldn't get a visa. I mean, yeah, this is the peak of the Cold War. This is really, really different than it is today.
Brezhnev.
This is, yeah.
Any day they were going to drop the bomb on each other, and the Cuban missile crisis.
And the arms race was escalating. It was just wild. Yeah,
but the Swami kept saying he wanted to go to Russia. So we were in Bombay, and he said one day to me, he says, you think you can get me a visa? And I said, well, I don't know. I'll go and try. And I went to the Russian consulate in Bombay, and somehow or other I was able to get visas for me, one other American servant, and Prabhupada for 5 days.
Just 5 days?
And we didn't know anybody there. Right. We just, they gave us, it was a package tour where they gave us a hotel room, and every day we had to go out on sightseeing tours. In those days, Russia and India were quite close in that India was buying all of its arms from Russia, and Russia had hopes that India would become a socialist country.
Okay.
So they allowed him in, and then because we were Americans, they let us come. We had to come with him. And the second day there, I was changing money at a bank, and this Russian boy came up to me and asked me if I wanted to change money, rubles, with him. I said, no, I better not, because the KGB was watching us. Everywhere I looked, I kept seeing this one guy.
Yeah. Following
us around. And I said, no. He says, I better not change any money with you. And then, do you have any jeans? No, I don't wear jeans. Do you have any Beatles records? No, but the spiritual master for the Beatles is in a hotel a block from here. Do you want to meet him? So this boy, Anatoly, he was a philology student. He spoke English. He sat down at Prabhupada's foot for 3 days and 3 nights. And I saw the Swami zap this guy in a way I never saw such power any other time in my time with him, that he gave this boy total self-realization in 3 days. And that boy went on to create thousands of disciples in Russia, underground. Wow. They were heavily persecuted. Many were killed by the KGB, thrown in hospitals and prisons.
Right.
And now the Krishna Consciousness movement is like the 3rd biggest religion in Russia.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Russia and Poland, right? It's exploding.
Yeah. All because of Prabhupada, his powerful. Oh,
Wow, that's amazing. And in this movie, that I keep speaking of, Hare Krishna, in the movie, there's photos of that.
oh, is there?
Yeah.
I took those photos.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, there's lots of them. That's wow. I mean, it's such a stark scene because there you are in Red Square, and there's no one there.
We couldn't get any food. It was the height of summer, and I had to stand in line a block long to get a cabbage.
Oh my God!
It was really gruesome, grim.
So, also, were you there part of the group that went to when Prabhupada went back to India
Yes.
and brought all you guys? Yeah.
Yes.
So, what was that like?
The dancing white elephants. Well, India had never seen anything like this. That one of their own had gone out and conquered the West and brought back the results. And they saw that what he was preaching and what we were realizing was the real thing. You know, and it was a national sensation. We barnstormed the country in a few months' time. We were the most successful, I guess you'd say, religious group in India.
That's amazing.
He was just reviving their ancient tradition.
It was reviving what they already had.
Yeah,
right?
it wasn't concocted or anything like that.
Huh. Wow. So, all this time later, and you look around the world today, I mean, you've led a pretty spectacular life yourself, and you've traveled the world and doing all your own activities and stuff. But do you look around the world today and considering what you experienced in the 60s, do you kind of feel it's a little bit crazier or more disjointed or more kind of in the thick of the Kali Yuga than ever before?
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? That today's world is much more advanced age of quarrel and confusion than it was even in the 60s. Just in my lifetime, the world's population has, quadrupled?
Yeah.
Something like that?
In my lifetime, it's doubled.
Yeah. The resources on our planet are nearly depleted.
Yeah.
The time is speeded up to the point where it's moving so fast, nobody can keep up with it. So my only hope is that more and more people will start seeking relief from this temporary material position. I mean, our level of sense gratification has reached the extreme.
Yeah, we can't sustain it.
We can't sustain it.
Yeah.
I mean, what people have to start asking, what's next? What's beyond these senses? Gratifying these senses so much.
So applying kind of Krishna consciousness to this and this idea of sense gratification, what are just some kind of practical things that people can do? I mean, to me, I just think it's about, start by reducing your life. You don't need every single thing all the time,
Well, it's not something radical that you have to change everything in your life. You just channel it or dovetail it in another direction. You take what you have and use it for the service of Krishna. And that simplifies everything. That makes your day from the time you wake up till the time you go to bed. If you devote that time to serving God, you don't have to change anything. It becomes except your consciousness, the object of your activity. And it's easy in that sense. It's the easiest thing you can do, really. But on the other hand, it's very difficult. But our senses are like a trap that trap us into the confusion of it's called Maya or illusion.
Right. So, I mean, that's really what's kind of grabbed hold of the Kali Yuga, essentially, right? Is just like this endless, quest for more. More. It's just always this idea of having to have more, and you can never be content.
And you'd think now with this speeding up of that whole process that people are going to start asking more and more, what is the purpose of life?
Yeah.
Krishna consciousness is not easy. In one sense, it's very easy. It's easy to chant Hare Krishna.
Yes.
But it also requires total sacrifice. I mean, not big sacrifice. You have to give up killing for your food.
Yes.
Eating meat. mainly, and intoxication, you have to give that up. Illicit sex outside of marriage, gambling, speculation. If you give those things up, they become quickly replaced by the joy of dedicating your life to Krishna or to God. As a sacrifice, almost. But who's going to do this? Who's going to do this? My hope is that now that the material world is becoming increasingly nasty, a nasty place, maybe more souls will give up their attachments to their bodies and the physical world to find, experience the eternal truth.
And to find peace within.
Peace within.
Yes. Wow, so beautiful, Shyamasundar. Any parting stories or anything you want to share? I mean, you've got so many. This book, Chasing Rhinos with the Swamis, it's amazing. There's a lot in here. Anything?
Well, this is the first volume. It's the first of 3.
Oh my goodness!
The other 2 are already written.
Okay.
This is just San Francisco, 1967, 68, and London, 68 to 70.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, and then the next volume is India. And then after becoming Prabhupada's secretary, around the world, the places we went around the world.
I love this picture in here, like of the Swami singing kirtan and the hippie hill and with all the drums and the hippies behind him, because I just have this picture of because it was kind of like a cacophonous mess in a way, just all of these drums and people chanting. It was like, oh my gosh. Now kirtan is so good with amazing harmonium players and mardanga players. Then it just was like, what are you guys doing?
Prabhupada blessed us so much in those early days with his tolerance, and he must have zapped us in some ways, because we could never forget him from the moment we met him.
Wow.
And this. In today's world, it's just more of the same. This Kali Yuga, this age of quarrel and confusion, is advancing. Just in my lifetime, the world population is tripled or something.
Yeah. Well, in my lifetime, it's doubled, right? So,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Shyamasundar Das, thank you so much for doing this podcast. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that was the podcast, and we haven't done this in a while, but I haven't given away a book in a while, but I have a copy of Chasing Rhinos with the Swami. So just send an email to info@itsallhappeningshow.com with the end in the subject. info@itsallhappeningshow.com with the subject being the end. And you will be entered in a chance to win. I have a copy of Chasing Rhinos with the Swami to give away. So hope to hear from you. Thanks.